let's get started. You guys, welcome to today's webinar, Meditation for Stress Relief. I'm your host, Janet Parker Evans. Meditation can be included in anyone's routine, and it is never too late to start. Sharon Salzberg is a meditation pioneer, a world-renowned teacher, and a New York Times bestselling author. And she joins us today for a conversation about the benefits of meditation at any stage of life. And today she'll also hopefully guide us through live meditation. Sharon was one of the first meditation specialists to bring mindfulness and loving kindness meditation to American culture over 45 years ago. This meditation style has inspired generations of meditation teachers and wellness influencers. Sharon is the co-founder of the Insight Meditation Society in Barre, Massachusetts, and the author of 12 books, including the New York Times bestseller, Real Happiness, and her seminal work, Loving Kindness. Her most recent book was released this past April, Real Life, The Journey from Isolation to Openness and Freedom. Sharon hosts the Meta Hour podcast that has surpassed over 6 million downloads. This podcast features interviews with thought leaders from the mindfulness movement and beyond. Well, welcome, Sharon.
Well, thank you so much. It's such a great delight to be with all of you. I've been thinking about you for days, approaching this. And I'm very excited for this chance to be together and to look at this topic, which is so important for me. So I went to India to learn how to meditate when I was a college student. It was quite some years ago. And I had created an independent study project. I really wanted to learn how to do it because I had just by accident almost taken an Asian philosophy class as a sophomore, and I was going to college in Buffalo, New York, and I was taken with this idea of meditation, that there were methods, there were practices, there were actual techniques, which if you practice them, might help you be a lot happier. And so I looked around Buffalo, did not see it anywhere. This was a different time before, like the research and the science and so on, and created this independent study project, and off I went. So from the beginning of my acquaintance, meditation has been presented to me as a kind of skills training, in the sense that I think often of what I would call the stress dynamic, that there's pressure, there's unwanted change in life, or there's unexpected change, there's adversity, there's even newness, something starkly new. And then there's just the kind of relentlessness of some kind of chronic issues that are weighing upon us. There's the stress, and there's the resource with which it's met. There's the inner resource. There's a sense of not being so alone, feeling part of a greater community. Lots of different sources of that resource. That's resilience, because the stress will happen. And sometimes people hear this and they think, well, you're only going to focus on the inner resource. You're not going to try to change things or make them better for yourself or your family or whatever. And that's not true. But why make that effort from a place of maximum depletion and exhaustion and feeling like you don't have the wherewithal to kind of move through something? Maybe find others who are in similar situations, having a sense of not being so alone, and therefore meeting it in a different way. And we know this from just an ordinary day, right? Like, you didn't sleep well last night, maybe you're really tired. You go out into a group, maybe you're working or maybe you're visiting people, and somebody makes some comment that you just find incredibly irritating, and you take it to heart. And it becomes like your day, it becomes your mood. And then you act on it. You send an email because of it. That's different than if you slept beautifully last night and you had an amazing breakfast with people that you care about, and you're just going about your day, and you go into this room full of people, you hear that comment, and you think, wow, that person's probably having a really bad day. It's just different. And so I look at meditation, and certainly it has functioned that way for me, as being a major way in which I have built that sense of resource to meet life, whatever it is presenting. So it's a skills training in a few different ways. One is in concentration. Most of us might experience ourselves as kind of focused or concentrated in many arenas of life, probably not in all of them, we tend to distraction, feeling scattered, uncentered, maybe fragmented in some way. I once was teaching a class and somebody raised their hand and they said, I feel filled with loving kindness and compassion and care for all beings everywhere as long as I'm alone. But once I'm with others, it's really rough. And we all laughed because we knew what that felt like. And of course, it can be the other way around. We might feel fine when with others and very ill at ease, kind of disjointed being alone. So, what would it be like to kind of gather all that energy, all that attention, and feel more whole, more centered, more grounded? That's what concentration practice does. We develop greater stability of attention, greater presence. We learn how to begin again and again. And this is very important. Many times in meditation practice, we choose an object of awareness. It may be a word, an image, the sensation of our breath, a phrase of loving kindness, like calling someone to mind and thinking, may you be peaceful, may you be well. And we rest our attention on that object. And lo and behold, it doesn't last long. We find that our mind jumps into the past. And while there are many good ways and useful ways of thinking about the past and having a greater understanding of different times and what we want to bring forth and what we want to maybe let go of, this is not generally what happens. They say that when we jump into the past in that kind of distraction, it's usually to a time where we have some regret. I should have said nothing. I should have said more. Why did I go there? Why didn't I go there? And again, there are ways of learning and the ways of making amends and the ways of moving forward in a different way. But this is just kind of going over it and over it and over it and over it. And we're exhausted. And I'd say probably for most of us, it's an and, our minds jump into the future. And we create a scenario that has not happened. And it may never happen. But we're feeling like the burden of it. It's like after 8 months in Massachusetts, which is where I am now, I went back to my rented apartment in New York City. This is sort of height of pandemic time. And I could watch that sort of play in my mind. Like I heard somewhere that you go into a place and you haven't been there in a while and you turn on the water and the faucet looks fine, but the water, has like all these diseases. Maybe when you get Legionnaire's disease, what does it look like? What do I feel like? It's like, woo, right? Just an arc of anxiety out of nothing. So what happens in this development of concentration through meditation is we learn to recognize what we're feeling. We learn to let go gently, no blame. This is just the habit of the mind to be distracted. We learn to let go gently. It's what one of my teachers called exercising the letting go muscle. And we learn to come back. That coming back again and again and again is, I think, a perfect reflection of what happens in life. Because every day I feel like I'm doing that. I fall down and I have to pick myself up or let someone help me up. I start over. I need to make a course correction. I'm sure I'm right. And then I listen to somebody else. I think, well, maybe that's all right. And I'm able to adapt. I'm able to be more flexible, able to be more mobile in a way. This is all emotional. I don't mean fall down physically, although that can happen too. This is what we do again and again. This is what resilience is. And this is what we're actually practicing, the simple act of concentration. We rest our attention somewhere chosen. We realize we're gone. We come back. The second skill of meditation practice is mindfulness, which is a word that's gotten awfully popular since I first started meditating in 1971. Mindfulness is a word that can mean many things. I use it to mean an empowered awareness where we can more see our experience as it is, not all enmeshed in projection, like I'm the only one who ever feels this, whatever the emotion may be, or this is all I'll ever feel. You can use the example, for example, of physical pain, which is a reality for many people. There's one way in which we might feel the pain. There's another way in which you might feel the pain plus. It's like when there's a certain physical pain in our body and the whole rest of our body tightens up as though to somehow ward it off, get rid of it, expel it. We have then added tension to pain. That's what's happened. And the greater experience is that it's more difficult rather than less difficult. We learn how to view those add-ons. Again, without blame, it's just a habit. We learn to let go of the add-ons, be with the experience more as it is. Pain is still pain. And maybe not what we would have chosen off a menu, but we don't get a menu. And we certainly don't need pain plus. And what happens in that moment of being more gently aware of whatever may be happening is that we can develop a different relationship to it. And in that, there's a different perception. We learn to see a thought as a thought, and we're empowered to check it out. Is this true, actually? Do we want to take it to heart? Do we want to let go of it? It's up to us. But to begin with, we have to see the sensation or the feeling or the thought early on, not after we've acted on it, not after we've had a big reaction and set all these wheels in motion in terms of our conversation, our family, our decisions, whatever it might be. So one example I think of is a friend of mine who describes herself as a recovering catastrophizer. And she'll say this about herself very, very publicly. So it's not like, I always feel funny when I say, my friend says this or does this. They know that I say this. So she describes herself as the kind of person, she's 86 years old, who will call one of her now quite adult children and then answer the phone. So what her mind goes to is the worst must have happened. And I do want to say, as a human being with a life, I know the worst does happen sometimes, and so does she. But this is not that. She will say that in an actual crisis or something's gone wrong, in real adversity, she's steady, she's clear, she can act, she can lead. This is more just the stuff of her mind going round and round and round and round. And she says, never occurs to me that they might be taking a shower. Or maybe they fell in love and they don't feel like talking to their mother. And it was this kind of tension. Not only it was like trashing her nervous system and also affecting her relationships quite a lot, that led her to want to undertake meditation. And what she'll say now is that many, or certainly some, of the same thoughts may arise. They do arise. But she has so much more perspective on them. She has some space. She has some ability not to just kind of go into that tunnel right away. She has the ability not to add on, like, this has got to be true and I'm the only one, and just like, right? She can more see the thought as a thought, then she can check it out. So I was talking to her not too long ago. She said to me that she had a new mantra meaning a phrase or a saying or something that she would tend to repeat to kind of shift gears, or when she felt herself falling into old habits, she'd go, hey, wait a minute, I don't need to do that. Very gently. So I said, what's your new mantra? And she said, my new mantra is, not every bus ends up in a ditch. And I thought, that's pretty great, you know? So all of this is tied up with what we mean by mindfulness, to see more clearly without so much clutter what our experience actually is. This is the actual physical sensation. This is the actual emotion. This is the thought pattern. To have enough space to really look more deeply into it. Another example of mindfulness would be if we, I read it years ago in the New York Times, there was a pilot program bringing mindfulness into the classroom. This was a fourth grade classroom in Oakland, California. So the journalist asked one of the kids, like, what is mindfulness? What is mindfulness? And he said, mindfulness means not hitting someone in the mouth. That's what mindfulness means. And I thought that is a great definition of mindfulness, because what does it imply? It implies you know you're feeling angry when you're starting to feel angry, not after you've sent the email. not after you've lashed out at a family member or somebody else. So you're so aware, you feel things as they're building. It also implies that ability to be with one's experience without getting totally engulfed in it, without pushing it away. So you feel the anger and you're not completely subsumed by it right away. Because if that happens, you're likely to hit a lot of people in the mouth, because life can be really frustrating. But you're also not ashamed of what you're feeling and piling on and trying to deny it and trying to repress it, because if that happens, you get tighter and tighter and tighter till you explode. I like to think of the space that's just created with that 9 or 10-year-old as he's practicing mindfulness with his feelings, where he might, in the space that gets created, think, hit someone in the mouth last week. Didn't work out that well. Let me try this. So there we are. It's not that we never act or react or move or feel, but there's enough space so that we feel free in making these kind of choices. And it's not only when you're 9 or 10 years old. I started meditating when I was 18, which was young. And my teachers always said, the way I didn't appreciate it at the time, it's easier if you're a little older. You've seen some life. You've probably had to let go of some stuff, maybe a lot. You've absorbed the truth of change, like in your body. Now, of course, I'm older, considerably older. I really appreciate that in truth, it's never too late to undertake a practice of greater awareness, greater focus, greater understanding. In that process, we find we actually enjoy life more. It's like the simple things that certainly I used to disdain. It wasn't intense enough, it wasn't dramatic enough. It was too kind of ordinary. I would just overlook them, or I'd look the other way, or I was always judging, like my experience isn't good enough. It's like I could just be with all of these things. I had one teacher, a man named Manindra. He was Indian. I was in India. And he was very scholarly. He was very studious. And we asked him one day why he meditated. And I certainly expected a very studious, scholastic response. And to my surprise, he said, I practice meditation so that I don't overlook the beautiful purple flowers growing along the roadside. So there it is. There's so much really of abundance, of joy, of things to be grateful for, even if they're small, that we might overlook, that we don't need to overlook. We don't always have to be multitasking, for example. Sometimes we can just drink the cup of tea without also be checking our email or whatever we're doing, to taste it, to savor it, to have it actually register. And life opens up in a very different way when we develop the habit of paying attention. And I'll just say the last of the skills after concentration and mindfulness is a quality of connection. First, to ourselves. We connect much more deeply to ourselves and with greater kindness toward ourselves as we allow ourselves to feel what we're feeling, as we learn to let go more gently and start over. And that becomes the basis, oddly enough, for feeling more connected to others. I always felt it was odd because meditation could look like the most solitary activity ever. Like maybe you sit with your eyes closed, maybe you sit and not walk, maybe you do it all alone. Not necessarily, but you might. And yet, in the process of looking, of getting more connected to ourselves, we get so much more profoundly connected to others. For one thing, we learn how to listen better to others, just as we learn to listen better to ourselves. We learn to be kinder, more compassionate, rather than maybe so judgy, to open to the unknown, to be willing to be surprised by others, and so on. So even though the instructions for meditation would tend to be rather simple, the experience can be very profound and transformative. So thank you.
That's great, Sharon. That was so beautiful and so interesting and helpful.
I love all those thoughts on kindness and connection and all of that. Um, for those listening, we already have a couple questions popped in, but now, Sharon, would you mind guiding us through a meditation practice right now so that we can all experience the value of it ourselves?
I would love to. Thank you. And I think what I would like to do, I'll probably combine several different techniques, and we'll just go for it.
Awesome. Let's go for it.
So the underlying principle is really balance. We're deepening lots of different things in meditation: calm, tranquility, relaxation, and also energy and alertness and awareness. And right away, if possible, that can be reflected in your posture. There's some energy in your body, so you're sitting up kind of straight if you're sitting. Lying down is fine too. But you don't want to be like so much energy you're stiff and uptight. Just be at ease. It's not like a weird thing to do. It's really a pretty natural thing to do. And you can close your eyes or not, however you feel most at ease. You can also change midway so that you may start with your eyes closed, for example, but you get really sleepy and you decide to open your eyes. That would be fine. You can start just by listening to sounds, or maybe the sound of my voice or other sounds. It's a way of relaxing deep inside, allowing our experience to come and go. Of course, we like certain sounds and we don't like others. But you don't have to chase after them, to hold on or push away. It's like if you're not responsible for responding to the sound, just let it wash through you. They come and they go. And bring your attention to the feeling of your body sitting, whatever sensations you discover. See if you can feel the earth supporting you. See if you can feel space touching you. Usually we think about touching space, we think about picking up a finger and poking it in the air. But space is always touching us. It's already touching us. It's like this blanket. Bring your attention to your hands and see if you can make the shift from the more conceptual level, like fingers, to the world of direct sensation, picking up warmth, coolness, pressure. You don't have to name these things, but feel them. And bring your attention to the feeling of your breath, just the normal, natural breath. You don't have to make it deeper or different. And see where the places that it's clearest for you or strongest for you. That might be the nostrils, it might be the chest, it might be the abdomen. If you want, you can put your hand on your abdomen and see if you can feel just one breath. You don't have to worry about what's already gone by. You don't have to lean forward, even for the very next breath. It's just this one. And if you like, you can use a quiet mental notation like in, out, or maybe that's a word, love, peace that's important to you. And use it very quietly to help support the awareness of the breath. This was the first instruction I ever got in meditation in India. Sit down and feel your breath. And I used to think, what's that? That's stupid. Like I could have stayed in Buffalo to feel my breath. Like, and what's it going to be like 800 breaths, 900 breaths before my mind starts to wander? Well, it wasn't. It was like one breath. Brings us to the magic moment. We're feeling a breath, we're gone. You realize that instead of blaming yourself or putting yourself down, this is the moment we have the chance to be really different. We practice letting go. Whatever distraction may have come up, and we come back. Gently bring your attention back to the feeling of the breath. We let go and we come back. That's not a sign of failure. This is really a practice of recovery. The poetic way of saying it is that the healing is in the return, not in never having wandered to begin with. You settle your attention on the feeling of the breath. It's a kind of rest. Then you fall asleep, or you're thinking about the past, or you're lost in some fantasy. It's okay. You realize that, gently let go, and you come back. Maybe a certain emotion arises or a sensation in your body, and it's not that easy to let go of and come back to the breath. And it's coming up with some intensity, some strength. Stay with it for a little while. See if you can recognize the difference between what you're feeling actually in the moment and what might be appearing more as add ons. Should be able to stop this, shouldn't be here. Should have gotten rid of this long ago. I've been meditating for 50 years, for God's sake. Why is it still here? It's mine. If you can see that difference, see if you can gently let go of the add on. Come back to what's actually happening. And then see if you can come back to the feeling of the breath. And I just want to end with the kind of breath exercise that's a little different, that suggested if you're feeling like pretty anxious or distressed, kind of agitated. And that's really, there are many, many ways of practicing this, but the fundamental principle is that if your out breath could just be a little bit longer than your in breath, the whole parasympathetic nervous system will start taking over from the sympathetic nervous system, and you will kind of chill. Your blood pressure may go down. The kind of panicky feeling will start to recede, very possibly. And it's good not to do these things with a kind of grasping, but it's an experiment. So if your in-breath is lasting 2 counts, see if your out-breath can be 3 or 4. Some people have better breath capacity than others, for sure. It may be longer than that. It may be even a different proportion. But just see if your out-breath can be a little bit longer, at any rate, than your in-breath. And when you feel ready, you can open your eyes or lift your gaze, and we'll end the meditation.
Thank you, Sharon, for guiding us in that beautiful meditation. Now that everyone is grounded and relaxed, let's dive in a little bit and talk about how we can include meditation in our daily routine. Is it something that you think is better in the morning or at night, or is there anything that you think is, the best way or time of day to do it?
I don't think there's a best time of day, and my meditation teachers throughout India and Nepal and Burma and Tibet would all say the same thing. They're kind of realists. The best time of day to do it is when you're going to do it. And this is different than like yogic traditions. They might say first thing in the morning is really the best. I have students who maybe drive to work a little early and they sit in meditation in the parking lot before they go in, or you can do walking meditation. They walk and they're meditating at the same time, obviously eyes open. I hope it's obvious.
You better be.
Things like that. There are many options, and I would say I have a friend who's a neuroscientist who studies meditation, and especially in high stress occupations like first responders, military, high performance athletes. And she said her lab has found that just 12 minutes a day, 3 to 5 times a week will make a difference in your life.
Really?
And I always say to her, because we're friends, and I'm also a night owl. So in my traveling days when I would stay with her, I'd keep her up to like 2 a.m. She'd be like really tired. But I always say, isn't that maybe that healthy to go for the bare minimum, And also I say, self-understanding, self-knowledge plays a big role in this kind of thing, because I say for me, every day is actually easier than 3 to 5 times a week. Because if it's 3 to 5 times a week, it'd be Monday, and I think I'll start on Wednesday. Be Wednesday. I'll do it 3 times on Saturday, and I'll never do it. But every day is every day. So you use your own understanding of what helps you to kind of make this kind of experiment.
Yeah, that's smart. We have a question from Devra who wants to know, kind of on that point, do you recommend several shorter, like 10 to 15 minutes throughout the day, or is there more benefit in a longer practice?
There's actually apparently not more benefit in a longer practice. I have so many friends who are neuroscientists now, because I have the opposite asset. I have meditators, who they can study. They say no. You can even Amishi Jha, who's my friend I was just talking about, will say you don't have to do the 12 minutes all at once even. But then I come to there are really 2 ways of seeing meditation. One is the kind of a more formal, dedicated period, where let's say you're sitting and you think, okay, for the next 10 minutes, the next 15 minutes, I'm going to just try to deepen the qualities of concentration and awareness or mindfulness and compassion. I'm not also going to be thinking about my my vacation plans intentionally. That may come up, but you don't sit down thinking, this is a good time to figure that out. So that's like the formal dedicated period. And then there's what we call short moments many times. It's just sprinkling a little awareness in what we're doing. It's deciding, you know what? I'm just going to drink this cup of tea. It doesn't like take hours and hours. It's not going to undo your to-do list. But like for once, to really taste the tea, to really feel the warmth of the teacup. Little things like that throughout the day make a big difference.
Christina has a great question. She says, when we were doing the meditation just now, I kept going to the beach. The birds around me chirping turned into seagulls. It was so calming when I first started. And then before my mind took me to a safe space, I started seeing the color green. And she asks, was I doing it wrong? And I have to tell you, that's always my question. Is like, was I doing it wrong? How do we know if we're doing it right or doing it wrong? And was what Christina experiencing right or wrong?
It's not wrong. It's fine. It's definitely not wrong. There comes a time though where you want to build in just that coming back. Because like for me, again, this is really expressive of the way my mind works. I'd see the color green and then I think maybe I should repaint my room. Then I think that was a really unfortunate color. Why did I do that? Look at that. Like, why can't I be more decisive? I know why I did it. I did it because my friend told me it would be a good choice. It was a bad choice. Why do I always listen to other people, right? And I am gone. So before that, if you can do it before that, to realize, okay, let me add a little bit of structure, sort of coming back. You don't have to reject like what you're experiencing, but it's just like, okay, let me just take another breath and kind of ground. And if not before, then in the middle, and if not in the middle, then after. To have that kind of refuge in a way.
We have a question coming in from Andrea. And she says, I've been meditating for around 10 years. And recently, I have a lot of resistance. Mm-hmm. How do you help with that?
That's all right. What do I have? I have the sort of intensity of the pandemic when I was teaching an extraordinary amount online. People would start bringing me cups and sending me mugs, which had sayings on it. So I thought I might have one. I don't. I have banging your head against the wall is never fun, which apparently is something I said. But another thing I said, and I have several mugs that say, either we feel what we feel, and we have to allow every feeling the dignity of its existence. We feel what we feel. Something like resistance can be very interesting. So one approach would be sit down and feel the resistance. Don't fight it. Don't feel bad about it. But what is it? Sometimes it's boredom. Sometimes it's feeling I'm not good enough. Sometimes it's having some idea, well, I've been meditating all these years. This hasn't happened. There's so much in there. It's like rich terrain just to explore. And it's not to judge and it's not to figure it out, but just to see, like, what is this? Leads to a lot of insight. I've done that, for example, with fear. And what I've seen is that, and what you need to do is not try to be thinking, why is this here? And what am I going to do about it? But what is it? What do I feel in my body? What's the sort of mood as it plays out? And what I've seen with fear is that unlike the world's pronouncement, which is also true, that we're afraid of the unknown, I'm afraid when I think I do know. And it's going to be really bad. It's all the stories I tell myself, like, I'm going to go back to the apartment, I'm turning on the water. And that really is a helpful insight. Because then I understand it much more as it plays out in me. And so that is definitely one approach. And the other is, for now, maybe don't focus on that dedicated period. Focus on drinking a cup of tea, washing your face. Have fun.
Yeah, that's interesting. When you talk about just sitting and enjoying that cup of tea, it's like, boy, we do always multitask, don't we? We do everything at the same time, which means we're doing nothing well, right? So I love that thought of everyday moments and stuff. We have a question from Stacy. And this is similar to that idea of resistance in practice. And she says she had a hot flash this morning while meditating, and she decided to use that hot flash as a chance to tune into her body. And she says, can you comment on other reminders to be mindful, like sort of mindfulness bells? I love that phrase. Other mindfulness bells we may have.
Well, in terms of formal sitting, we have mindfulness bells with a strong sensation. That's what I meant by a strong sensation or a strong emotion. Something comes up with some intensity and we can't control it. You can't say it's not going to happen. This is going to be a perfectly placid sitting, where I'm not really experiencing much. We don't know. But when something comes up that's strong enough to take our attention away from the breath, where it feels like it's sort of a conflict, it doesn't feel right to just let go and come back, then we try to open fully to that experience. And I'm sure she did beautifully. It sounds it, that you're just paying attention to what is and are more able to distinguish what is from the story we're also telling about it. It shouldn't be here or whatever it might be. And so that's really what would happen in the evolution of formal practice. But conscious mindfulness bells the rest of the day is an interesting question, because that's by design. That's our choice. And it can be a lot of fun. It can be interesting. Like, probably the most common example of that comes from the Vietnamese meditation teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, who said, don't pick up your phone on the first ring. Let it ring 3 times and breathe. Then you pick it up. I was once teaching in a financial firm in New York City, and I suggested that. And I looked up and I saw the complete panic on everyone's faces. And I said, maybe for you, just twice. Let it ring twice. So 2 or 3 times, whatever it might be. And that's what's fun. It's like you kind of feel yourself go for it. And you think, well, just breathe. People arrange for their computer to make odd sounds now and then, or certainly something like a meal or a cup of tea, and decide, I'm going to really just try to pay attention. It's also fun to do it a little bit with a group. It could even be just one person, because then you can just share your experience. And we undertake many things like that. A mindfulness bell, a gratitude practice. I have students who've come to me and said, I found a gratitude buddy, so that at the end of each day, we're going to text each other and just say, this is what I found to be grateful for. And things like that are very reassuring, because it could be conventionally kind of small, but not to be ignored.
I like that. It's like, yeah, you get to choose, like you're saying, what you focus on, and focus on those things. We had a question. We have a lot of people that are caregivers, and they're taking care of their parents and their family and everything. How can meditation help people who are caregivers?
Thank you so much for that question. I mean, for many years, I would say these are my people. I've spent a fair amount of time, and as much time as I can, working with caregivers. And what I really see is the pillars of this society. It's like the whole thing would fall down without the work of caregivers. And I also, because we didn't get to do it here together this time, but I teach so much compassion meditation and things like empathy and so on. And I've been almost like kind of amused at watching kind of the movement toward more empathy training. And certainly we can see a world without a lot of empathy, which is pretty cold and cruel. But these people, the caregivers, they've got empathy, but they're burning out for some other reason. And so being able to investigate that, or part of teams investigating that, and looking at what happens when you have a great deal of caring and maybe not as much caring for yourself, and what happens when you have a great deal of caring but you can't fix it. You're dealing with a nearly intractable system, or you're dealing with just the nature of things, and being able to come back in the moment and retrieve the joys that are also there, and have more reasonable boundaries, different expectations, remembering yourself, and that's not wrong, it's not selfish, it's not self-centered, that's essential. And we have a lot of practices in loving kindness for oneself, which is the right thing to do, because it's the balance. I mean, I think it's an amazing area for meditation practice and what I've seen it can bring.
Yeah, it's the emotional part of that is so powerful, that caring for yourself when you're caring for everyone else. Christine has another question as relates to emotions. And she's asking if you could talk a little bit about anger and rage.
Yeah, that is a common feeling. And I'll go back to my mug, my principles. You have to allow yourself to feel what you feel. The question is, how do you want to relate to the feeling? Do you necessarily want it to guide you into action? Do you want to punch that person in the mouth? The ideal is with something like anger, being able to retrieve the energy of it. So you're not passive, you're not just letting things happen, you're active, you have agency, you're trying to make a difference, but you're not so caught in the burning or the delusion of it. First of all, it's pretty unhealthy, right? To just if people think expressing your anger is going to take care of it, it doesn't take care of it. But that means being enmeshed in it, is not that healthy. But it also leads to a kind of forgetfulness. It's like sometimes I tell this story about way back in early email days when, you'd hear that sound that said you had an email coming in. You're so happy. So it was way back then. And I was sitting here, actually, upstairs on my desktop computer, working on some project, and I heard that sound. And I went to answer the email, and someone was asking me a question. They said, I don't understand the problem with anger. And I should say, we're not talking about feeling anger. We're talking about being lost in anger, being overcome by anger. I don't understand the problem with that. So I wrote back and I said, well, one problem when we're lost in it, and certainly over a period of time, is that we tend to put people in a box. Then I got off email and went back to my project, and something went terribly wrong in the relationship of my computer and my printer, and I got really angry. So I was down on my hands and knees, like pulling out plugs and putting in other plugs. And our computer person, this is before we even had the phrase IT, he was in Hawaii on vacation. And in my rage, I totally forgot that the reason he was on vacation is because I thought he needed a vacation. And the reason he was in Hawaii is because I had taken my frequent flyer miles and gone to the airport, which is what I had to do in those days, to get him the ticket. It's like, I forgot that. He betrayed me. He's not here when I need him. He doesn't, this project is so important. And the next person I was really angry at was myself. I can't fix anything. Why don't I know how to use a computer? I can't even do this right. But in the meantime, I fixed it. And I hardly even took a moment to appreciate that. Hey, you fixed it. So I got back up on my chair and went back to work on my project, and I heard that sound again. So here was my original correspondent saying, I don't understand what you mean when you say, when we get lost in anger, we put people in a box. So I wrote back to him. I said, this is what I just did. I put him in a box, this computer person. I put myself in a box. You can't fix anything. And that intensity of that feeling shut in, being trapped by that, was very strong. So could I capture the energy of discontent? Something needs to change without, getting so lost in it. Hopefully that's what we work toward.
I love the idea that you can recognize that you're having that emotion versus acting on it too. That's so powerful. And similarly, Chris wants to know if there's a way to control always trying to anticipate what could happen rather than being in the present.
Yeah, I mean, that's partly what we do, but it's like, you can call it like exercise. Don't despair if that kind of leaning forward, wanting to control, it's like hypervigilance also can arise, but you feel that, you start to feel like I'm out of balance. You just take a deep breath and come back. And also it's important to be content with just a momentary shift back. Maybe you find it coming up again, but you come back. Like when I was first practicing meditation, truly I was very disdainful of that instruction, like sit down and feel your breath. I thought, I came all the way to India. It was the magical, esoteric, fantastic technique that's going to make me fully enlightened and totally happy. Really, I could have stayed in Buffalo to feel my breath. And what's it going to be? 800 breaths, 900 breaths before my mind wanders. And then it was like one breath and I'd be way gone. And as I kept practicing, because I was the instruction, over time, I realized there was a lot going in there. Like one of the reasons it was difficult for me was because almost as soon as this breath began, I'd sort of mentally be leaning forward for the next. So I felt I had to be ready for it. I had to see what was going to happen. A lot had already happened to me in my life, even though I was just 18. And I didn't know what would happen next. And I was very frightened and very wary, and I was very hypervigilant. And so for me, balance looked like settle back. Let the breath come to you. I used to say to myself, you're breathing anyway. All you need to do is feel it, because it was almost like I had so much performance anxiety. It's like I'd never done it before, never taken a breath. It's like, settle back. Let the breath come to you. You're breathing anyway. All you need to do is feel it and not be despairing when I found myself leaning forward again. Because that's going to happen. It's just, how it is. It's somebody put in the chat. That's why we call it practice.
I know. I love that, Joan. Yeah, it's called practice. We never perfect it, right? I love that too. Christina asks a really interesting question. Do you think mindfulness is similar to having a third eye?
I don't know. I mean, probably in Tibetan tradition, which is where that idea is where I'm most familiar with it. I'm sure it's in Hinduism and other things as well. I'm sure it has its own meanings and layers of meanings. So I don't know.
It's interesting. Brad wants to know if you have any tips on meditation in motion while you're driving or while you're walking or anything like that.
There are many walking meditations I'm most familiar with. I'm in New York, right? I learned how to drive till I was in my 30s, well into my 30s. But there are driving meditations that has to do with sensation. You don't want an object of awareness, especially in a more complex activity that needs equipment and it's too much, and you're trying to think of this usually elaborate visualization. It's usually just sensations. So in driving, it's often feeling the steering wheel or feeling your back, and it's not like a tunnel vision kind of awareness. Obviously, you need to be aware of what you're seeing, what you're hearing. So it's pretty relaxed, but every now and then coming back to sensation, which will help you be more present and more aware. Walking meditation is similar, eyes open also. And instead of some teachers do use the breath as where you're just resting your attention. My teachers did not. They would more say, like, feel your foot go up and down, feel your foot touching the ground. And especially with your eyes open, your mind's going to wander. You're going to be all over the place. Yeah. Same thing. Just let go. Unless you need to be there, aware of what's going on. And you come back to that feeling of sensation. And it's not necessarily easy, even though the object is simple, just the most predominant sensation happening. But it's actually so different to walk down the street that way. And, and you also see a lot, like what's coming up in my mind is this time, maybe 5 years ago, I was in the hospital in California and pretty sick and recovered. But when I was first up walking with a physical therapist and with a walker, I was apparently dashing around because the physical therapist said to me, it's not a race, She said, you'll do better if you stop now and then and take a break. And so that has become my mantra. It's like, it's not a race, So you just kind of see a lot as you do anything that's active.
See the flowers on the side of the road, like we started. A couple people have called out some of your guided meditations in your books and all of that. Is there a way or a place that people can find some more of your guided meditations? Are you on Insight Timer or anything like that?
I am on Insight Timer, although probably the easiest place is my website, which is SharonSalzberg.com. There's something kind of inelegantly called the store. Guided meditations are free. Or on a donation basis. There are a couple of my books where I've written some meditations for caregivers, some loving kindness meditations, and I'm trying to think where they appear. One is in, I read a book called Real Happiness at Work, which followed Real Happiness. And I think maybe even in 2 other places because it's so meaningful to me.
Yeah.
The best thing to do, and if that is your interest, is shoot me an email.
Yeah. So
SharonSalzberg.com.
we're posting right now. You can see all the places you can learn more about Sharon. And Sharon, I want to thank you so much for joining us today and sharing so many helpful tips. And this guided meditation was marvelous. Thank you to everyone that joined us today as well. We're going to be emailing everyone a recording and transcript of this webinar. So you'll be able to view it again or share with family and friends. You're getting so many shout outs in the chat. I hope you're looking. Everybody's so happy you're here. These are the places you can learn more about Sharon. And great news. Somebody called out about how great your new book is. Well, so thank you so much. And please, everyone, join us on November 9th, 2023 at 11 a.m. Central for our next webinar with ARP caregiving expert and author of Juggling Life, Work, and Caregiving, Amy Goyer. Each of our webinars features a different subject. You can visit brookdale.com/in-the-know to discover more. And we do hope to see you again soon. Thank you again, Sharon. And everyone, until next time, we hope you stay safe, happy, and well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.